Mucking about with boats rates pretty highly on my list of things to do. I just love it. Something I've probably got in common with a young boy who grew up here and probably played at this very spot. He grew up to sail real ships across real oceans. In fact, he became only the second Englishman to circumnavigate the world. His name is George Anson, and he grew up here at Shugborough. He was born in 1697. It was his elder brother Thomas who would inherit the family title and estates. So like all second sons, George had to seek other employment. So he joined the Royal Navy at the age of 14, quickly working his way up the ranks to his first command at the young age of 22, on a ship called the Weasel. Fortunately, this dreadful name for a vessel didn't affect the rest of his career. Eventually, he became First Lord of the Admiralty. But it was his epic voyage around the world in 1740 for which he's most remembered. At the time of Anson's voyage around the world in 1740, Britain was engaged in a brutal and bloodthirsty war at sea with Spain. The aim was to weaken Spain's dominance over the trading markets of South America, and in doing so, give us greater access to its natural resources, its precious metals, particularly silver. The fleet that set sail from England under Anson's command consisted of 6 warships, led by his flagship, HMS Centurion, a formidable fighting ship capable of heavy-duty firepower. But this was no ordinary military campaign. Anson's orders, delivered to him on behalf of King George II, included instructions for a secret mission to attack a Spanish treasure ship laden with Peruvian silver as it made its way across the Pacific from Acapulco. But between them and those spoils of war lay the tempestuous seas of Cape Horn. Notorious for foul weather, violent gales and thunderous waves. Battered by relentless storms, 2 of Anson's ships turned back to England. Their captains were later to face charges for desertion. A 3rd ship was washed up onto the rocks off an island off the coast of Chile. When Anson finally reached China, he was left with 1 vessel, the Centurion, and a handful of men, some of whom, it was noted, had turned mad. Returning to England under these disastrous circumstances would have certainly marked the end of his naval career. Now, whether Anson's next decision was one of pure genius or sheer desperation, it's impossible to tell. But he decides to have one last attempt at catching up with the Spanish treasure ship as it was crossing the Pacific from Acapulco to Manila. Now, despite being in a patched-up ship with a crew of just over 200 men, half the size of a normal crew, Anson had the self-belief and the determination to command his crew to capture the Spanish vessel. As shown in this painting, Anson advanced on the enemy and at extremely close quarters engaged the Spanish ship in fierce combat. Someone with first-hand experience of battle at sea is Rear Admiral Christopher Lehman. With 35 years in the Royal Navy, he is also an expert on Anson's voyage. So talk me through what happened when these ships finally engaged.
The chief difference between the two was that he was tremendously undermanned. He only had 200 men on board, and he should have had double that number, really. So he couldn't man all the guns, but he made the most of it. And his tactics were brilliant. There was no question of firing a proper broadside, which is firing all the guns off together. So instead of a guns crew allocated to each gun, they had roving gangs that went from gun to gun.
Relay, yeah, like a tag team.
In a relay.
It was desperate, and they had to do it that way.
It was desperate, fighting for their lives, but they were also fighting for a fortune, because they all knew this was the Spanish treasure galleon. He'd been training for this for a month, you know. He'd been tacking up and down at the point here where he was expecting the galleon to arrive.
Around the Philippines.
That's right. And he got 30 of his best marksmen and put them in the tops, trained them every day, firing at targets, rewarding the ones who were most accurate.
Yeah.
And of course, they did tremendous damage. In the rigging, firing down,
Picking off people.
picking off people, and first of all, I imagine, accounting for the marksmen in the other ship, in the other rigging. At least that's the order I would do things.
Yeah, get them out first, then get
Yes.
the officers.
That's right.
And then get the guys firing the cannons.
Exactly. And of course, while the musketeers were doing their work from the tops, the heavy guns were hammering the ship.
Right along the bow.
That's right. Very effective tactics. And
With one of those.
with one of these, and to be at the business end of that when it arrives is not a good
You wouldn't
place
know
to
about
be.
it, would you? That would go through the port side and out the starboard, would
It
it?
might well do that. And if you knew nothing about it, you were one of the lucky ones. The others who were wounded, mostly by splinters probably,
Yes, because that would ricochet.
huge splinters come from the ship's side and give nasty wound to anybody in the way. Very effective tactics, worked very well. She surrendered with all the treasure intact.
And each crewman, I gather, gets a part of that reward.
He
don't
certainly does. A huge prize,
Is it?
which would set him up for life.
Capturing the Spanish ship sealed Anson's reputation as a great military commander when he returned to England. It took a staggering 32 wagons to transport the chests of treasure, containing mostly gold and silver coins, to the Tower of London, with an estimated worth in today's money of £15 million. The Spanish treasure ship was the greatest prize ever captured at sea. Not only had Anson delivered the gold the King of England asked him to fight for, but in doing so, he circumnavigated the globe, ensuring his fame as well as his wealth.